Tracing the ancestral roots. The quest to trace one's genealogical roots has always been a fascinating journey, uncovering stories of ancestors and their myriad connections. This document delves into the genealogical bond between Steve and Brent Cammett, revealing the lineage that binds them across generations. Your lineage traces back 10 generations to the early settlers of New England. They originally immigrated from England, settled in the Massachusetts Bay Colony during the 17th century. One of the patriarch of your family was a man named Thomas Cammett, a farmer and a dedicated member of the local Puritan community. His descendants continued to thrive in this region, contributing significantly to our community's development. Throughout the ages, you will notice among the historical documents, you will see, their name has been spelled in a couple of variations. These deviations are expected when researching our ancestors for a variety of reasons, which I will explain during your journey back in time. This journey will explore 10 generations of Cammett families. Starting with both of you as the 10th generation, we will travel back in time to your 4th generation and your first shared great-grandfather, a man named Silas Cammett Jr. Then, we trace up 3 more families to your 7th great-grandfather, a man named Thomas Cammett, known as Generation 1 in genealogical terms. While traveling back in time, we will uncover their stories left behind in their private and public records, newspaper articles about the times they lived in, their loves and tragedies. As stated before, Brent's family is the 10th generation from his currently identified 7th great-grandfather Thomas Cammett. Brent was born on December 14, 1973. The son of Allison Lincoln Cammett and Karen Levesque. Brent would meet a young girl named Heather Warren, born on September 23, 1974, the daughter of Robert Francis Warren and Linda Sue Rogers. But before we travel up the Cammett's family tree, let's take a quick look at Heather's ancestors, the Warrens. So far, my research up Heather's family tree has led me to a John Warren that settled in Kittery, Maine, afterwards to Berwick. From John, we continued up another 3 generations to James Warren of Kittery, Maine, born before 1656, making you the 12th generation of James Warren. The Warren genealogy of the descendants of James Warren, your 9th great-grandfather, was published in 1902 by Orrin Warren. Then in 1909 the Genealogical and Family History of the State of Maine was published by the New York, Lewis Historical Company, which also provided more information of the Warrens of Maine. Heather's ancestry will be covered in future videos. One of Allison's earliest public documents found was the 1950 United States Census for his father, Edward, and Mary Cammett. The family was living at 29 1/2 Merrimack Street in Amesbury, Mass. His father, age 43, was a hatter, a hat maker, at the Merrimack Hat Company. Mary, his wife, age 41, home worker. Edwina Knowles, his daughter, age 19, now separated, and working as an ironer at a laundry. Pauline, daughter, age 15, not working. Patricia, daughter, age 13. Edward, son, age 11, Christine, daughter, age 10, Charles, son, age 8, Allison, son, age 5, and Catherine F., daughter, age 3. Allison at the age of 18 would join the Army on July 30, 1963, and was discharged on October 30, 1963. After his marriage to Mary, they would become parents of Michelle, their daughter, born July 26, 1966, Scott, a son, born October 6, 1969, and Brent, yours truly, born December 14, 1973. Allison works as a licensed oil burner technician and was employed by Lombardi Oil Company in Newburyport, Mass. At the age of 53, Allison's obituary was published in the Journal Tribune, Biddeford, Maine, on October 19, 1998. He was laid to rest in Maplewood Cemetery, a United States veterans' grave site, in Limerick, Maine. His rank was noted as private. Additionally, he has an online memorial on Find a Grave, which is owned by Ancestry.com and maintained by its members. Up next we will visit your grandparents' family, Edward Arthur Cammett and Mary Veronica Edwina Hogan. The 8th generation of Cammett. Edward Arthur Cammett was born on March 10, 1906 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, the son of Charles Henry Cammett and Sarah Sadie Jane Lord. Edward's earlier public records were found in his father's, your great-grandfather, Charles's, 1910 United States Census data. In 1910 the family was renting a house at 37 Dennett Street in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. At that time, his father was 44 years old and worked as a carpenter building homes. His mother, Sadie, was 40 years old. His brother, Woodbury, was 20 years old and employed as a waiter at a restaurant. His sister, Ida, was 18 years old and engaged in housework and various odd jobs. His other sister, Elsie, was 9 years old, and his other brothers, Charles, was 7 years old. Edward, your grandfather, was 4 years old, and Raymond was 1 year old. In the 1920 census, his father's family is renting a house at 6 Pray Street, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. His father is now an electrician. Everyone is 10 years older, and Woodbury and Ida have left the family. Elise married Arthur Egerian and they live next door to her parents. Edward, at the age of 21, would marry a young woman named Mary Edwina Horgan, age 19, in 1927 in Newburyport, Massachusetts. She was born June 13, 1908 in Amesbury, and baptized at St. Joseph Church in Amesbury June 16, 1908, the daughter of Charles Joseph Hogan and Bridget Delia O'Brien. In his 1930 census, Edward, now 24 years old, is working as a hatter in a hat factory. His wife Mary, now 22 years old. The two of them are renting an apartment in Amesbury, Mass. Let's review Edward's 1940 census on Ancestry.com to see what we can discover about him and his family. Recap of the facts about Edward we gleaned from his 1940 census. He works for a private company as a pouncer, in a hat factory. So what does a pouncer actually do? He would perform the task of sandpapering the crown and brim of a hat to remove loose fur fibers on the surface. This process, known as pouncing, was performed mechanically on low-cost hats and by hand on higher-quality beaver hats. He states he works a 50-hour week in 1939. The family is living at 29.5 Merrimack Street in Amesbury, Mass. His 1940 yearly income was $1,500, in today's dollars is equal to $34,300 or $2,860 a month. Edward is renting his apartment for $15 a month, which is equal to only $286. We also found out who his children were, when and what state they were born, and everybody's age. Edward A. Cammett, father, age 34, schooling 8th grade, born, New Hampshire. Mary E., wife, age 31, schooling, home 4th grade, born, Massachusetts. Edwina J., daughter, age 9, schooling 2nd grade, born, New Hampshire. Pauline L., daughter, age 5, schooling none, born, New Hampshire. Patricia A., daughter, age 3, born, Massachusetts. Edward Jr., son, age 2, born, Massachusetts. Christine, daughter, age 3 months, born, Massachusetts. In their 1950 census, Edward and his family is still living at 29.5 Merrimack Street in Amesbury, Mass. Edward is now 43 years old, residing with his wife Mary. Their family has grown since 1940 with the addition of 2 sons and a daughter. Edward is still working as a pouncer in a manufacturing plant, putting in 30 hours a week as a private worker with the Merrimack Hat Company. The household now consisted of 10 members, showcasing a bustling family life in their apartment. Their firstborn child, a daughter named Edwina Joan Knowles, age 19 years old, was married and is now separated from her husband, Chester Knowles. Pauline age 15, Patricia age 13, Edward Jr., age 11, Christine age 10, and their additional children born after their 1940 census, Charles, age 8, Allison, your father, age 5, and Catherine age 2. Just before World War II, Edward had to sign up for the draft. He was 34 years old at that time, and living at 12.5 Merrimack Street in Amesbury, Mass. He was employed, for most of his life, at the Merrimack Hat Company in Salisbury. And he placed the name of a person who would always know his address, his wife, Mrs. Mary Edwina Cammett. Edward passed away on January 4, 1972 in Amesbury, Massachusetts, at the age of 65. His cause of death is unknown at this time. He was interred at Union Cemetery in Amesbury. Mary would follow him on June 5, 1988, also in Amesbury, Massachusetts. Her last residence was Sandown, New Hampshire. Her cause of deaths and final resting place is currently unknown. He was the 5th son born to Stephen Gordon Cammett and Sarah Eunice Healy. In the 1870 United States Census, Charles's family was recorded living in Exeter, New Hampshire. His father, Stephen, 39, was a laborer, and his mother, Sarah, 36. His siblings were John, 13, Ida, 8, Charles, 5, Freddie, 3, and Eliza, 1. Then in the family's 1880 United States Census we find them still living in Exeter, New Hampshire, but the family has grown with the addition of 2 boys and a girl. His father, Stephen, occupation, a laborer, 40, his mother, Sarah, 46, John a laborer, 25, IRA, 19, Charles, a laborer, 16, and attending school, Fred, 13, Eliza, 11, Samuel, 9, and finally, George, 4, your grandfather. At the age of 24, Charles Henry Cammett, a farmer, would marry a 19-year-old, Sarah Jane Lord on May 30, 1888 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She was born on May 7, 1869 in Portsmouth, the daughter of Levi Woodbury Lord Sr. and Anne Maria Shannon. Their marriage was published in the Portsmouth Daily Chronicle on Friday, June 1, 1888. Cammett and Lord. In this city, May 30th, at the residence of the bride's parents, by the Rev. J. S. Harrington, Charles H. Cammett of Exeter and Miss Sadie J. Lord. firstborn, Woodbury Carroll Cammett, was born on December 11, 1889 in Exeter, New Hampshire. His residence was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. His father, Charles's occupation has changed to a shoemaker. Woody would become a famous musician who played multiple instruments without formal training. He gained significant publicity in New Hampshire and California, where newspapers praised his talent. More about him later in a separate video. The second child, Ida May Cammett, was born on December 16, 1891, in Exeter, but her original birth record was not available but referenced in a Massachusetts birth database. Their third child, Paul Gardner Cammett, he was born on February 15, 1894, and he died on December 4, 1899, he was 5 years, 9 months, and 19 days old. His cause of death was diphtheritis, or membranous disease, commonly called membranous croup. He was laid to rest in South Street Cemetery, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The Portsmouth Herald newspaper listed the monthly burial permits issued by the city, and Paul was the first permit issued for the month of January. Their fourth, a male, and fifth, a female, were stillborn twins, on October 26, 1895. Then their sixth child, who was unnamed at birth and later named Annie, was born on November 15, 1896, but Annie, at the age of 2, would die of pneumonia on November 11, 1898. In their 1900 census we find the family living on 31 Maplewood Avenue in the bustling town of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, lies the home of Charles Cammett, a skilled carpenter at the age of 34. Married to Sadie Cammett for 12 years, they share their household with their 2 children, Woodbury, age 10, and Ida, age 8. Sadie, his wife, now 31 years old, reported the number of children born, 6, and the number of children living, 2. Based on those numbers, she had lost 4 children, but we only found the death records for 3 of her dead children. We know Sadie lost her third child, Paul, and then, her unnamed fourth son, a stillborn, and lastly her sixth child, Annie. So we have 1 child unaccounted for. However, we did find a record for a stillborn daughter whose parents were Sarah and Charles, with the same dated as their 4th stillborn son but without her birth order given, so they must have been twins, born and died on the same day. Despite the loss of 4 children and facing 2 months of unemployment, Charles takes pride in providing for his family. The Cammett family, rooted in New Hampshire, embodies a sense of hard work and dedication, evident in their ability to read, write, and speak English fluently. Living in a rented house, surrounded by neighbors on every side, the Cammett household stands as a testament to resilience and familial unity in the early 20th century. Then the 7th child, Elise Louise, was born on June 23, 1900, who was born 21 days after the 1910 census, which was taken on June 2 and of course, not listed. Then Charles Henry Jr., their 8th child, was born on June 30, 1902, his birth was placed in the Portsmouth Herald newspaper on July 2, 1902 on page 8. Then their 9th child, Florence, was born on December 19, 1903. Then Edward Arthur Cammett, your grandfather, and their 10th child, who was born on March 10, 1902, and finally their 11th child, Raymond Alvin Cammett, born on March 11, 1909. In their 1910 United States Census we see the family renting, at 37 Dennett Street in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Charles Cammett, a 44-year-old carpenter, resided with his family, in a rented house. Charles, a native of New Hampshire, was the head of the household, married for 21 years to Sadie J. Cammett, who was 40 years old. Their bustling home included 7 children, Woodbury, 20, Ida, 18, Elsie, 9, Charles, 7, Florence, 6, Edward, your grandfather, 4, and Raymond, 1. The family, all able to read and write, lived comfortably with Charles as the wage earner. This snapshot captures a glimpse of a hard-working family in early 20th century America, where Charles's carpentry skills provided for his large and growing family. Charles' records show us, he was a very busy man at home and away. He worked as a carpenter and electrician throughout his life, and he was not immune to injury. This fact was reported in the Portsmouth Herald newspaper on April 20, 1903, where it reported that Charles Cammett is laid up with a badly poisoned hand. Also in 1910, he was appointed assistant pipeman by the Association of Firefighters Engineers, namely the M.H. Goodrich Engine Company No. 4 in Portsmouth, which notice was published in the Portsmouth Herald on page 1, a Tuesday, April 5, 1910. He was appointed to the same position in 1911. On February 16, 1911, Charles's father, Stephen Gordon Cammett, who is also your second great-grandfather, died after suffering from Bright's disease for 7 months. He was 82 years old. His obituary appeared in the Portsmouth Herald on Saturday, February 18, 1911, on page 2. He was buried in High Street Cemetery in Hampton in the family plots. He left a will that listed his living children. His family we will cover in our next video. The year after his father's death, his mother Sarah died of dropsy, edema, and heart valve disease on September 2, 1912, in Hampton, New Hampshire at the age of 78. In her death record, her mother was listed as Betsy Coombs, your second great-grandmother, and her husband was Stephen Cammett. She was buried in the family plots at High Street Cemetery in Hampton. 1930 census. His level of education, he wasn't attending school. He was able to read and write. He is in the construction business as a carpenter. Charles rents their home. The household did not own a radio. They were living at 428 Pleasant Street in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He was born in New Hampshire. He is 67 years old, and married. He was 23 years old when he first married. His mother was born in New Hampshire and his father in Massachusetts. Below Charles is his wife Sarah, who is 60 years old. She was born in New Hampshire, her father in Maine and mother in New Hampshire. And below her name and living next door is her daughter Elise and her husband Arthur Egerian and their 7 children. Sarah Jane Cammett fell ill and passed away from pneumonia on July 13, 1931, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at the age of 62. Her death records listed her mother's maiden name as Anne Maria Lord, born in Portsmouth, and her husband's name as Charles H. Cammett. She was buried on July 17 in the South Street Cemetery in Portsmouth, New Hampshire alongside her sisters, Emma Lord Stanwood, at the age of 54 and Nellie Lord Davis at the age of 51, who both died from diabetes. Both her sisters, in their death records, listed their father as Levi Lord. Emma's also listed her mother as Annie Shannon. The next public record we found for Charles was in his 1950 United States Census. He is still living on 428 Pleasant Street in Apartment 6, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He has been living at this address for the past 20 years and, at the present time, the home is now owned by his son-in-law and daughter. He is listed as a widow, age 85, resided in an apartment with his daughter, Elsie Argerial, and her family. Despite his advanced age, Charles did not work and was not seeking employment. The household consisted of 10 members, including Charles, Elsie, her husband Arthur Argercio, and their children. Among them was Elaine Cammett, Charles's 20-year-old granddaughter, highlighting the intergenerational dynamics within the family. The bustling household on Pleasant Street painted a picture of familial support and togetherness, with Charles playing the role of the respected patriarch. In about 1946, Charles developed a chronic lung condition called bronchiectasis, which makes it hard to clear mucus out of your lungs and can cause frequent infections. After 15 years of suffering with this condition, he would pass away on February 5, 1961, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at the age of 96. His death certificate listed his parents as Stephen H. Cammett and Sarah Healy. Occupation, house wiring. Date of birth, December 16, 1864. His residence, 428 Pleasant Street, where he has lived for the past 30 years. The informant on his death certificate was his son-in-law, Charles Argeria. Charles Henry Cammett was buried in a tomb at South Street Cemetery, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, on April 12, 1961. This concludes the long and fruitful life of your great-grandparents, Charles Henry and Sadie Cammett, who contributed greatly to expanding their legacies of the Cammett families in these United States. Stephen Gordon Cammett was born on October 4, 1929, in Exeter, Rockingham, New Hampshire, to Samuel Shackford Cammett and Elizabeth Betsy Coombs. His parents, Samuel and Betsy, were from Chester, New Hampshire, and moved the family to Amesbury, Massachusetts, sometime around 1830. The first public record we find for Stephen was in his father's 1850 United States Census, taken on August 23, in Amesbury, Massachusetts. The following information was recorded: dwelling number 350, family number 407, family names: Samuel, your third great-grandfather, age 42, a laborer, with a real estate value of $2,000. Betsy, your third great-grandmother, age 42. Stephen, your second great-grandfather, 19. His siblings: Sarah, 18, David, 16, Mary, 14, Samuel, 12, Charles, 10, Martha, 9, Hannah, 6, and lastly, Ellen, 4. Also an unidentified Mary, age 28. In the marriage records for Salisbury, in the county of Essex, Massachusetts, during the year 1853, Stephen Cammett, a farmer, age of 22, on March 19, 1853, he married Sarah Eunice Healy, an 18-year-old female from Salisbury, Massachusetts. Sarah was born on September 14, 1833, in Exeter, New Hampshire, the daughter of Nathaniel Healy and Sarah Currier, his second wife. In the 1855 Massachusetts State Census for Amesbury, Stephen Cammett's family appears on line 63. He is 24 years old, his wife Sarah, age 22, and their son Edwin H. Cammett, is 2 years old. The family right above Stephen, on line 62, is his uncle, Silas Cammett, and his wife Louisa and their 3 children. Stephen's father, Samuel, is the brother of Cyrus, and the identity of their father would be the first half of the key for unlocking the elusive connection we are so desperately seeking. Of course, Steve's side of the family holds the other half of that key. As we ascend up both Brent's and Steve's ancestral trees, in order to find a connection, it is essential that we identify every child, especially males, which will enhance our odds of finding the elusive connection. Their union resulted in 9 known children being born, but their records told another story. Their first son, Edwin Herbert Cammett, in his death record, he was born on January 13, 1853, in Amesbury, Massachusetts, and died on April 26, 1939, in Exeter, New Hampshire. He was 89 years old. His father, Stephen Cammett, and mother, Sarah Eunice Cammett. Watch his video. It's an amazing life story of a man desperately trying, time and time again, to settle down and begin a family. See his life story in the series of Generation 5. Next, John Franklin Cammett, birth record, born on August 27, 1855, in Nantucket, Mass. Father, Stephen Cammett. Mother, Sarah E. Cammett. Both parents born in Amesbury, Massachusetts. Their current residences, Amesbury, Mass. Next, Sarah Maria Cammett, birth record, born December 3, 1859, father. Stephen and Sarah E. Cammett, both born in Exeter, New Hampshire, current residence, Amesbury, Mass. Although she was given this name at birth, in adulthood, she went by Elizabeth Maria Lizzie Cammett. Parents often named their children after themselves and call them by their middle name to avoid confusion. These children frequently continue using their middle name as adults. Sarah in adulthood, and in all her records, was known as Elizabeth Marie, and she married Edward Towell. In her death certificate they listed her parents as Stephen Cammett and mother, Sarah E. Healy. She died of breast cancer in 1934. Next, Ida Mae Cammett. In her birth record, an order of birth was noted for the first time. No such order of birth was noted on any previous births. However, Ida was noted as being their fifth child born. Only 3 siblings were identified before Ida Mae's birth, so it appears her mother must have had another child who was born and died before Ida Mae's birth. Ida was born on October 18, 1861, in Exeter, New Hampshire. Her father, Stephen Cammett, was a farmer, and her mother, Sarah Healy, was also born in Exeter, New Hampshire. Her brother Samuel Cammett from Exeter, New Hampshire, reported her birth. It is possible that Samuel was mistaken about the number of children his mother had born. Next, Charles Henry, your great-grandfather, born December 16, 1864, in Exeter, New Hampshire, father, Stephen H. Cammett, mother, Sarah Cammett. Next, Fred Allen Cammett, marriage records, born in 1868, father, Stephen G. Cammett, mother, Sarah Healy. Then, Eliza Jane Cammett, death record, where we see her parents were Stephen Cammett and her mother was Sarah E. Healy. She married Andrew J. Roberts. She was born February 28, 1867 in Exeter, New Hampshire, and died July 1, 1913 in Hampton, New Hampshire. She died from breast cancer at the age of 46, just as her sister, Elizabeth Maria Towell, would do 21 years later, from breast cancer. Next, Samuel Stephen Cammett, the only other child with his birth order being recorded, as the 9th child born, on September 18, 1870, in Exeter, New Hampshire, father, Stephen Cammett, mother, Sarah Healy. The informant was Samuel himself. And lastly, George William Cammett, born January 31, 1876, in Exeter, New Hampshire, father, Stephen Cammett. Intensive searches were completed to find any children whose fathers were Stephen Cammett, and whose mothers were Sarah Cammett, with an added bonus of a maiden name of Healy. We are confident that we have all the necessary information, so let us proceed by following their historical path. Stephen would move the family from Amesbury to Exeter, New Hampshire, sometime before his daughter, Ida Mae's birth in 1861. That year, Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter, triggering the beginning of the Civil War. One major consequence of the war was the United States Congress passing a conscription act, initiating the first wartime draft of U.S. citizens. This act required all males between 20 and 45, including aliens intending to become citizens, to register by April 1, 1865. On June 3, 1863, Stephen registered for the draft, at 36 years old, at that time, with a wife and 4 children. Classified as Class II, he was eligible and obligated for service but may have paid a $300 commutation fee to avoid duty. This practice led to the saying, "Rich man's war, poor man's fight." However, his 3 brothers, George, Daniel, and Charles, and many others, Cammetts and their in-laws, did serve in this war. In fact, they served in all the previous wars of this young nation. More about them, in separate chapters, entitled The History of Wars and the Cammetts. In the 1870 census, Stephen, now 39 years old and a farm laborer, and Sarah his wife, 36, the family having settled down in Exeter, New Hampshire, for the past 10 years. The family has grown since Ida May's birth. 3 additional children have been born: Charles Henry, now 5 years old, Freddie Allen, 3, and Eliza Jane, 1. Their other children, including Charles Henry, John Franklin, and Ida May, are all attending school and assisting their family after school hours. Their other 2 children, Edwin and Elizabeth Cammett, have grown up and left the family. On June 30, 1874, in Amesbury, Massachusetts, Stephen's father, Samuel Shackford Cammett, a farmer, at the age of 67, would pass away from liver disease and dropsy. His death record noted his parents as Silas and Anne, who were both born in Chester, New Hampshire. In his last will and testament he appointed his son Samuel Jr., Stephen's brother, executor of his will. In his will, he left all of his personal estate and income from all his real estate to his wife, for her use and disposal, for the duration of her life. Then in item 3 of his father's will, he gave $150 to Stephen and his brother George, which is equal to over $4,000 today, and to his daughters, Sarah Ford $25, and $100 to Elizabeth Hopkinson, Martha Cammett, Jane Huntress, and his son, Charles Cammett. He also gave his granddaughter, Etta Cammett $100, and the red organ now in the house and leaving it in the family as long as she remains single. Etta was the daughter of his son, Daniel Cammett, who was deceased at the time he made out his will. Not mentioned in his will was George and Ellen Cammett. He also instructed his executor, not to pay any of the aforenamed legacies until after the death of his wife, Betsy. Elizabeth Betsy Cammett would die of heart disease 5 years later on, May 22, 1879, in Haverhill, Massachusetts. She was 72 years old. The following information was noted in her death records: her place of birth, Exeter, New Hampshire. She was the daughter of Jonathan and Abby Combs, both born in Stratham, New Hampshire. They were both laid to rest in Union Cemetery in Amesbury, Massachusetts, with over 30 other family members. In their 1880 census, Stephen, now 49 years old, still a farm laborer for the past 20 years, and saving in order to buy his own farm. Sarah, his wife, now 46, had 2 more children, Samuel, age 9, and George, age 4, which would be their last child born. Still at home and working as a laborer was John Franklin, 25, Ida May 19, doing housework, Charles Henry, 16, and Fred Allen, 13. And Samuel are all attending school while George is playing cowboys and Indians at home. In their 1900 census, in the quaint town of Exeter, New Hampshire, nestled along Hampton Road, stood the sturdy house numbered 171, a home that belonged to the respected 70-year-old farmer, Stephen Cammett. With a lineage deeply rooted in the state, Stephen shared his abode with his devoted wife, Sarah E. Cammett, aged 67, and their son, George, a young man of 23. The Cammett family exuded a sense of tradition and stability, embodying the essence of a close-knit household where generations intertwined in the daily rhythms of rural life. As the patriarch of the family, Stephen's weathered hands tended to the land, embodying a legacy of hard work and resilience that had been passed down through the generations. The Cammett homestead stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of a family bound by love, duty, and a shared history that echoed through the rolling hills of Rockingham County. In their 1910 census, in the town of Exeter, New Hampshire, Stephen G. Cammett, an 80-year-old farmer, resided with his 78-year-old wife, Sarah E. Cammett, and their 27-year-old son, George. Stephen, the head of the household, owned their home on 10 Hampton Road, where they lived on a general farm. The Cammett family had deep roots in New Hampshire, with both Stephen and Sarah born in the state. Despite their advanced age, both Stephen and Sarah were literate, able to read and write in English. The couple had been married for an impressive 58 years, showcasing a long-lasting bond that had stood the test of time. The presence of their son George hinted at a continuation of their family legacy, with the younger generation likely involved in the family farm. The Cammett household represented a snapshot of a multi-generational farming family, embodying a tradition of hard work and dedication to their land. The location of Samuel's farm at 10 Hampton Road in Exeter, Rockingham, New Hampshire, is today occupied by the Essential Medical Market Research and Participant Recruitment Agency. As Stephen approached 81, his health declined significantly. He recorded his last will and testament on November 22, 1910. In his will, within Item 1, he listed all 9 of his children, Edwin H., John F., Liza M., Ida M., Eliza J., Charles H., Fred A., Samuel S., and George W. He instructed his executors, his wife Sarah, to pay each of them $1. In Item 2, he allocated the rest of his assets to his wife, Sarah E. Cammett. Just 3 months later, on February 16, 1911, Stephen Gordon Cammett died after suffering from Bright's disease for 7 months. He died in Exeter, New Hampshire, a resident for 54 years, and he previously lived in Amesbury, Mass. His parents were Samuel Cammett, mother's maiden name, Coombs. He was 81 years, 4 months, and 16 days old. His obituary appeared in the Portsmouth Herald on Saturday, February 18, 1911, on page 2. He was buried in High Street Cemetery in Hampton in the family plots. The year after Stephen's death, his wife Sarah died of dropsy, edema, and heart valve disease on September 2, 1912, in Hampton, New Hampshire at the age of 79 years, 11 months, and 18 days. She was reported as a summer visitor from Exeter, New Hampshire. On the back page, her husband was noted as being Stephen Cammett. However, her mother's maiden name was entered as Betsy Coombs, which is actually the maiden name of her husband's mother. Her obituary appeared in the Portsmouth Herald on Wednesday, September 4, 1912, on page 1. Headline: Exeter Letter. Mrs. Sarah Cammett, widow of Stephen, died Tuesday morning at the home of her daughter, Mrs. Albion Clark, at Hampton Beach, of heart trouble. She was nearly 80 years of age. She was buried in the family plots at High Street Cemetery in Hampton, New Hampshire. Their burial information and locations can be found on a website called Find a Grave, owned by Ancestry.com and maintained by its members. So far, as we have seen and heard, the Cammetts are a hearty and healthy bunch of people. Up next, we shall visit the 5th generation of Cammetts, Samuel Shackford Cammett and Elizabeth Betsy Coombs. Samuel Shackford Cammett was born in September 1806 in Chester, Rockingham, New Hampshire. His parents were Silas Jr. and Sarah Ann Seavey. Our research on his father's family was complicated and problematic due to the lack of family members being identified within the United States Census between 1910 through 1930. How we managed going forward will be explained when we examine his father's family records. So let us take a quick look at what we found for Samuel's records since his birth in 1806. In the 1910 census, Silas Cammett was found living in Chester, Rockingham, New Hampshire. Samuel's family members, other than his father, are not named but instead listed within age groups and gender, and number of family members within those groups. In their 1820 census, the family is still living in Chester, New Hampshire, with 7 family members listed. In their 1830 census, the family is still living in Chester, New Hampshire, with 8 family members listed. At 22, Samuel would marry Elizabeth B. Coombs, known as Betsy, on December 18, 1828, in Northampton, New Hampshire. She was 23 years old. Betsy was born on September 22, 1805, in Stratham, New Hampshire, daughter of Joseph Coombs and Abigail Godfrey. From this union 10 known children were born, 5 boys and 5 girls. Their firstborn was George Cammett, born on December 30, 1828. In his marriage records listed his place of birth in Exeter, New Hampshire, and his parents were listed as Samuel and Elizabeth Cammett. In his death record, his place of birth was Exeter, New Hampshire, and his residence in Newburyport, Mass. His occupation, blacksmith, and his parents listed as Samuel and Betsy Cammett. Later in life, George joined the Northern Army during the Civil War, alongside his two stepsons and two brothers. Their stories will be featured in later videos. Their second-born, Stephen Gordon Cammett, and Brent's second great-grandfather. His marriage lacks any information, no ages, occupations, parents' names, and not even if it was their first or second marriage, but in his death records it was noted. His birthplace was in Chester, New Hampshire, his residence in Amesbury, Mass, and his occupation as a farmer. His parents were Samuel Cammett, a butcher, born in Chester, New Hampshire, and Betsy Coombs, born in Stratham, New Hampshire. The remaining 8 children of Samuel Shackford Cammett and Elizabeth Betsy Coombs were found in the birth records in Amesbury, Massachusetts, with the exception of their first and second sons, George and Stephen, who were both born in Exeter, New Hampshire. Their children are listed according to their birth order. Notice the different spellings of their last names. Third child, Sarah Frances, January 2, 1832. Fourth child, Daniel, October 13, 1833. Fifth child, Mary Elizabeth, October 4, 1835. Sixth child, Samuel, October 5, 1837. Seventh child, Charles Henry, July 15, 1841. Eighth child, Martha Ann, February 19, 1844. Ninth child, Hannah Jane, November 30, 1845. 10th child, Ellen Abby, November 14, 1847. Also noted, in their later family records is Harriet Etta Frances Cammett, who is the granddaughter of Stephen and Betsy and the daughter of their deceased son, Daniel Cammett. After their marriage and the birth of their second child in 1828, Samuel and Betsy relocated from Exeter, New Hampshire to Amesbury, Massachusetts. They are listed in the 1840 United States Census with 4 additional children, Sarah, Daniel, Mary, and Samuel Jr., born in 1839. The family totaled 8 members, as reflected in the census record. We finally see, for the first time, the entire family with their full names, within their 1850 United States Census, with one exception, George Cammett, who at the age of 21, married Hannah Morse on March 3, 1850, she was a widow with 3 children who lost her first husband in 1848. The census records the following for dwelling number 350, family number 407, head of household Samuel Cammett, age 42, a laborer with real estate valued at $2,000, born in New Hampshire. Betsy, age 42, Stephen, age 19, a laborer and your second great-grandfather. Sarah, age 18, David, age 16, a laborer. Mary, age 14, Samuel, age 12, Charles, age 10, Martha, age 9, Hannah, age 6, Ellen, age 4. All children except Ellen and Mary are attending school. Also noted is Mary Cammett, age 28, likely a relative not yet identified. We not only see Samuel and Betsy's family in the 1855 United States Census for Amesbury, Massachusetts, we also see his brother, George, and his sister, Sarah Foot's families living next to them. This census informed us that Samuel is a farmer still and is 48 years old, his wife Elizabeth is also 48. Their children, Daniel a blacksmith is 22 years old, Mary Elizabeth is 19 years old, Samuel Jr. a farmer is 16 years old, Charles Henry is 14 years old, Martha Ann is 11 years old, Hannah Jane is now 9 years old, Abby Ellen is now 7 years old. We also find out that his brother George is a blacksmith who married a woman named Hannah and they have 3 children. We also learned that his sister, Sarah Frances, married a man named Frank Foot and they also have 3 children. In the 1860 United States Census for Amesbury, Massachusetts, we once again see Samuel Cammett. He is now 53 years old, still farming, with a real estate valued at $2,500 and a personal estate valued at $300. His wife Elizabeth, age 52, Daniel is now 27 years old and is now a shoemaker. Samuel is 21 years old, is also a shoemaker. Martha is now 17 years old and Ellen is 13 years old. This year their daughter Hannah Jane Cammett was married to Leverett Huntress on March 19, 1860. The conflict began with Confederate forces firing upon Fort Sumter in South Carolina on April 12, 1861. This act of aggression sparked a war that would become the deadliest in American history, with significant casualties on both sides and lasting until Confederate forces surrendered in 1865. Many Cammett family members have served in different wars. We will share detailed accounts of their descendants' experiences, organized by conflict and generation. These will be added to the end of their parents' videos. Samuel Shackford Cammett's 3 sons would join the Union Army. Both Daniel and Charles mustered into the 17th Massachusetts Infantry as privates. In Company D, on July 22, 1861, in Boston. The 17th was organized at Camp Schuyler in Lynnfield, Massachusetts. They both mustered in for a 3-year enlistment under the command of Colonel Thomas J.C. Amory. Charles, after his discharge from the 17th, would enlist for a second time in the 3rd Massachusetts Heavy Artillery. George Cammett married Hannah Farrington Morse, a widow with 1 daughter and 2 sons. He enlisted in the 1st Battalion Heavy Artillery, Company A, and his stepsons, Albert and Joseph Morse, also joined the Union Army. Their videos can be viewed or linked at the end of the video for Samuel Shackford Cammett's 5th generation. J. Plummer Cammett is George and Daniel's first cousin. He joined the 40th New York Infantry Regiment in Company B. He enrolled and mustered in as a private on June 14, 1861 in Yonkers, New York. He was 20 years old. He mustered out with a disability on October 19, 1862, Fort McHenry, Baltimore, Maryland. Length of service, 1 year, 4 months, and 5 days. According to some records, Private J. Plummer Cammett re-enlisted into Company E in the 26th New York Cavalry, on December 29, 1864, only one of his muster roll for his second enlistment was available. He mustered out June 30, 1865. His second enlistment dates were obtained from his 1890 federal census, for veterans. His length of service, 6 months. Now back to Samuel Shackford Cammett life story. In May 1864, Daniel Cammett returned home from sick leave as the 17th Massachusetts Volunteers came back to Boston. He suffered from congested fever affecting his lungs and passed away on August 2, 1864, at age 30. He was buried in Union Cemetery, Amesbury, Massachusetts. His life was marked by many tragedies, which will be detailed later. He left behind a motherless 4-year-old daughter named Harriet Frances Cammett, known as Etta. She was living with her grandfather, Samuel Shackford Cammett, who on September 4, 1864, obtained guardianship of his granddaughter, Etta. The family appears in the 1865 Massachusetts census for Amesbury. Samuel is still farming at 58, his wife Betsy is also 58, Samuel Jr. is farming at 25, Ellen is 17, and the new addition to the family is Etta Frances Cammett, age 4. Now in 1870 we found several documents for the family. The first was their United States Federal Census for Amesbury, Massachusetts. Samuel is still farming at the age of 63, his real estate is valued at $5,000, his wife Elizabeth is now 63 years old, his daughter Martha is now 25 years old, and his grandchild Edwin now age 16 years old, and Etten now 10 years old, who are both attending school. Below them is Samuel's nephew Jonathan Plummer Cammett, a carriage trimmer, and is 28 years old, and his wife Isabel, who is 24 years old, and their 2 children, Laura age 4, and Jay Plummer is 1 year old. Jonathan Plummer Cammett also joined the Union Army with Daniel Cammett, Samuel's deceased son. Samuel's next record found was their Essex, Massachusetts city directory for the year 1870, where we see a number of Cammetts, and after their names you see the word Mills. In the 1870s, the area referred to as the Mills in Essex, Massachusetts, was part of Salem, which was known for its small shoe manufacturing establishments during that time. Salem was an old and cultured city located in the southeastern section of Essex County, on the Massachusetts Bay. The first is Cyrus, a building mover, Mills. He is Samuel Shackford's brother. Gustavus, merchant, Mills. Is Cyrus' son, nephew to Samuel Shackford. John, laborer, Mills. He is the brother of Cyrus and Samuel Shackford. J. Plummer, teamster, Mills. His is Cyrus's son and Samuel Shackford nephew. Patrick, operator, Mills. There is no record for any Patrick Cammett, he must be using a middle name and whose family cannot be identified. R. Samuel Shackford, farmer. Samuel Jr., farmer, Mills, Samuel Shackford's son. Then we found a record in the U.S., selected federal census non-population schedules for Samuel Cammett for the year 1870. A non-population census records can add flesh to the bones of ancestors and provide information about the communities in which they lived. Samuel's farm is located in Massachusetts in the county of Essex, and in the city of Amesbury. The following is his farm's inventory taken September 7, 1870. Acres of land, improved, entered 27 acres. Cash value, of farm in dollars, entered $5,000. Cash value, farming implements and machinery, entered $200. Total amount of wages paid during the year including the value of board, entered $25. Livestock. Horses, entered 2. Milch or dairy cows, entered 3. Other cattle, entered 2. Sheep, entered 1. Swine, entered 1. Value of all livestock, entered $500. Indian corn in bushels, entered 40. Barley in bushels, entered 25. Wool in pounds, entered 100. Peas and beans in bushels, entered 100. Potatoes in bushels, entered 50. Udder in pounds, entered 75. Hay in tons, entered 10 tons. Value of animal slaughter or sold to slaughter, entered $225. What we found out is that Samuel's farm has no wooded areas and is totally clear and produces crops and grassland for grazing. Their 1874 Amesbury City Directory, which provides further information regarding the type of business they are engaged in and their residential addresses. Cyrus, building mover, residing at Friend Corner Summer. Gustavus, grocer and dealer in doors, sashes, and blinds, located on School near Friend. J. Plummer, carriage trimmer, residing at Friend near Lyons Mouth Road. Samuel, farmer, residing on Friend near Lyons Mouth. Samuel Jr., hatter, residing on River Road. Then Samuel penned his last will and testament dated June 10, 1874, he wrote the following. Hear all men by here present, that I Samuel S. Cammett of Amesbury County of Essex and Commonwealth of Massachusetts being of sound mind and memory do make this my last will and testament. First, I order my executor to pay all my just debts and funeral expenses and also erect a stone curbstone around my cemetery lot and also a suitable stone to my grave. Second, I give my wife Betsy Cammett all my personal estate for her own use and disposal, also the income of all my real estate for the duration of her life for her own use and disposal. Third, I give my son George Cammett $150 and to my son Stephen Cammett $150, also to my daughter Sarah Foote $25, also to my daughter Mary Elizabeth Hopkinson $100, also my daughter Martha Cammett $100, also my daughter Jane Huntress $100, also my son Charles Cammett $100 and also Etta Cammett $100 and to Etta Cammett the red organ now in my house and leaving in my family as long as she remains single. Fourth, the remainder of all my estate both real and personal, I give to my son Samuel Cammett for his own use and disposal. Fifth, I appoint my son Samuel Cammett executor of this my last will and testament, and order him to not pay any of the aforenamed legacies until after the death of his mother, as she is to have as before stated during her life. In testimony whereof I have present to set my hand and seal and publish and declare this to be my last will and testament in the present of the witness named below, this 10th day of June 1874. Etta was the daughter of his son, Daniel Cammett, who was deceased at the time he made out his will. Not mentioned in his will was Ellen Cammett. 20 days after Samuel Shackford Cammett signed his last will and testament, on June 30, 1874, in Amesbury, Massachusetts, he passed away from liver disease and dropsy. He was 67 years old. His death record noted his place of birth in Chester, New Hampshire, his residence in Amesbury, Massachusetts, his occupation a farmer, and his parents, Silas and Ann, who were both born in Chester, New Hampshire. Elizabeth Betsy Cammett would die of heart disease 5 years later on May 22, 1879, in Haverhill, Massachusetts. She was 72 years old. The following information was noted in her death records: her place of birth, Exeter, New Hampshire. She was the daughter of Jonathan and Abby Combs. Both were born in Stratham, New Hampshire. They were both laid to rest in Union Cemetery in Amesbury, Massachusetts. Their grave information and locations can be found on a website called Find a Grave, which is owned by Ancestry.com and maintained by its members. Your third great-grandparents had long, productive lives. They raised 10 children and a granddaughter from age 4 to adulthood. Despite many hardships and losses, they became prosperous and were able to pass on their wealth to their children. Up next, we will visit the family of our fourth great-grandparents, and in doing so, uncover your ancestorial connection to your current friend, Steve Cammett, because 2 of their sons' identities will forever change, both of your relationship, from friend to cousins. Finally, we have established both Brent and Steve's fourth great-grandparents, Silas Cammett Jr., and his wife Sarah Ann Seavey. He was the first son of Silas, and his wife Martha Smith Cammett, your fifth great-grandparents. Silas Jr. was born on January 5, 1780 in Candia, New Hampshire, the firstborn of Silas and Martha Smith Cammett. The original records of his birth and the identity of his parents and sister was found at the bottom of the handwritten page in Candia's New Hampshire marriage record for his father and mothers, Silas and Martha. At the top of the page is his uncle, John Cammett, marriage, and his children's birth. In the blow-up of the bottom of the page, which is difficult to read without practice, we can make out the following. Silas Cammett and Martha his wife, married June 17, 1779. Silas Cammett their firstborn January 5, 1780. Molly born November 12, 1781. Churches and public record keepers routinely updated older records by copying them into new ones repeatedly over time. On August 12, 1905, Candia's record keepers copied Silas Jr.'s birth record. Copying old records and providing information about deceased family members often leads to mistakes and inaccuracies, especially in death records of older people. During the 17th and 18th centuries, some parents outlived their children. To accurately identify a person, never rely on a single document. Always find at least 2 or 3 supporting documents to verify the accuracy. Shortly after Silas Jr. was born, the family moved from Candia, directly south, about 12 miles to Chester, New Hampshire. When Silas was 23 years old, he would marry a 17-year-old girl named Sally Seavey on November 17, 1803, in Chester, New Hampshire by the Reverend Nathan Bradstreet. Out of all the females the Cammett males would marry, Sally's true identity has been the most challenging. The lack of public documents on her birth name, and her parents was disappointing. Most of the information gathered on her was found by uncovering and tracking her children and their records. A problem surfaced at the beginning with their marriage record. The marriage record for Silas Jr. indicated he married Sally, as previously mentioned. However, there is another marriage record for a Silas Jr. with a woman named Sally Moore, officiated by the same reverend. Given the improbability of Silas Jr. marrying two women within a 2-month period, further research was necessary to confirm the true identity of his wife. Most of Silas Jr.'s children had either Silas, Sarah, or Seavey recorded on their death certificates, with 2 exceptions. It is important to note that there was a Sally Moore residing in Candia at that time, who was married to Herbert Moore. Therefore, we can dismiss the second record for Silas Jr. marrying a woman named Moore, as Sally Moore was not the mother of Silas's children. Her name Sally was likely her nickname used during her youth, while most subsequent records refer to her as Sarah. Also, the modern spelling for her surname, Seavey, today is Seavey. From this union, 7 children were born in Chester, New Hampshire. Their names, in birth order, were John, who settled in Salisbury, Massachusetts, Samuel Shackford, and his brother Cyrus in Amesbury, Massachusetts, Jonathan in Salisbury, Massachusetts, George, in Chester, New Hampshire, Hannah in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and Martha in Amesbury, Massachusetts. The process used in identifying her children I call the PPP. This involves locating a specific group of individuals to identify a particular family, essentially assembling a puzzle of people pieces. The PPP process is necessary because the census records starting in the 1800 through 1840, listed only the following information: the towns, counties, and states, where they lived and head of households, first and last name only, and then counted the number of males and females residing with them, then categorized them by age only without names. This was all the information obtained by the census takers. This system made it difficult to properly identify families, especially heads of households with similar first and last names, living in the same place or near one another. Without their first name, it made it impossible to identify who the other people were and what family they belonged to. And to make this situation worse, we identified 3 heads of households with the same name as Silas Cammett. These 3 Silases lived in different states, Massachusetts and New Hampshire, but were living in the same counties within their respective states, which was a good indication they were connected in some way. The task was to locate documents, with the surname of Cammett, in areas where they lived, including birth and death records, wills, town directories, and burial information. After identifying potential candidates, work began on tracing Steve and Brent's family connections upward. The 3 Silases were giving a number after their first name in order to keep track of each of them. Silas number 1 was assigned to the oldest, Silas number 2, the second oldest, and Silas Jr. number 3, the youngest. The focus of identification began with Silas Jr. number 3 and Silas number 2. One has to realize, in those times, family members and relatives helped each other on their farms or during hardships. Hired help often lived on the farm. The following charts use potential puzzle pieces, people, to identify the Cammett family members for inclusion into the census records. The first chart analyzes the 1800 census. The second chart examines the 1810 and 1820 census. The third chart reviews their 1830 census. Each chart has a copy of that year's respective census associated with it. The 1830 chart showed a 99% match for Silas Jr.'s family members and his father's family, which established where they were born, who they married and more importantly their children. Especially the identity of Samuel Shackford Cammett, who is Brent's third great-grandfather, and his brother, George Cammett, being Steve's third great-grandfather. Once we established Silas Jr.'s family, it paved the way up their ancestral ladder. Let's have a quick review of how their children and how they are connected to them from their records. First, John at the age of 67, who lived with his mother until her death and who died the following year. The informant on his death record gave his parents information as Silas and Sarah Cammett, both born in Chester, New Hampshire. Second, Brent's third great-grandfather, Samuel Shackford, at the age of 67, in his death record, listed his parents as Silas and Ann Cammett, but the most useful information about his parents was where they were born. The answer, Chester, New Hampshire. Samuel was also born in Chester, as was all their siblings. Third, Cyrus at the age of 78, the informant on his death record, listed his parents' information as Silas and Sarah Cammett, and both his parents, born in Chester, New Hampshire. Fourth, Jonathan at the age of 58, the informant on his death record, listed his parents' information as Cyrus and Sarah Seavey, both born in Chester, New Hampshire. Steve's third great-grandfather, George, listed his parents as Cyrus and Ruth Seavey from Chester, New Hampshire, in his death record at age 80. Name discrepancies are common in death records of the very old. George was indeed a farmer from Chester, the place where his parents were born and raised their children. The confusion between Cyrus and Silas likely arises from similar sounding names, possibly due to the same informant for both George and Jonathan's death records from Salisbury, Massachusetts. 6. Hannah, at the age of 82, her informant on her death record was her second husband Charles Crowell. He did not provide any information about her parents. But in her first marriage record to John Stockman, her parents were listed as Silas and Sarah Cammett. 7th, Martha at the age of 67, who married James Blaisdell, her informant on her death record gave her parents' names and place of births as Silas Cammett, born in Brentwood, New Hampshire, and Sarah Seavey, born in Chester, New Hampshire. All the information gathered from the children's records now presented a finished puzzle of the family of Silas Jr. Cammett and Sarah Sally and Seavey Cammett. Little is known about Silas, but what we do know is, he was a hard-working farmer who passed his knowledge down to his sons, and his wife's full name, based on her children's records, was Sarah Ann Seavey, and her nickname was Sally. Then on September 26, 1807, when he was 27 years old, his father, also named Silas, died in Chester, New Hampshire. His father was 55 years old when he passed. His death record only provided his name and date he died. But we did uncover his father's birth, death, and marriage records. We also uncovered his dad's Revolutionary War files, for he and his 4 brothers were all patriots, who joined the war against England. His final resting place is not known at this time, and his family will be covered in later videos. Then, on a cold winter's day on January 31, 1830, in Chester, New Hampshire, at the age of 50, Silas Jr. would die. His death record listed his name, Mr. Silas Cammett, but did not list a cause of death or his burial location. After Silas's death, What happened to Sarah was finally answered when we discovered 3 documents, but within those documents, a mystery emerged. The first, 10 years after the death of her husband, in the 1840 United States federal census, for her son John Cammett. This census listed a total of 4 people living with him. The information of one female that caught my attention was the free white person, female, 50 to 59 years old. This had to be his mother, Sally, for she was 54 years old at this time, and John, her first child born, was 36. He also fit with the males 30 to 36. The identity of the younger males are unknown, but one is thought to be the mysterious Francis S. Cammett. The second record was the 1855 Massachusetts census. She is still living with her son John, a laborer, in Amesbury, Massachusetts. Also living with them was the mysterious Francis S. Cammett, a young man of about 19 years old, a shoemaker. They were all born in New Hampshire. My confusion centered around the knowledge that her son John, in his public records, was always referred to being single, even in his death certificate, but I uncovered 2 stillborn male babies whose birth records had their father as John Cammett without the name of their mothers, and the births were in Chester, New Hampshire. The first stillborn male child was born in 1822 when John was 18 years old. The second stillborn male child was born in 1828 when John was 28. Francis was born when John was 32. No marriage or birth records for Francis Cammett were found, suggesting that John had these children with an unidentified woman, and their relationship ended for unspecified reasons. On April 12, 1861, the Civil War began. Sarah, now 75, was still living with her son John, now 57, and Francis S. Cammett left the family 4 years ago to join the army. The reason I used the word mysterious in describing who Francis S. Cammett was, I cannot find any information on his birth, death, or location after his military enlistment was over. His military records stated he was born in Chester, New Hampshire, age 21, a shoemaker, enlisted April 16, 1857, where, in Boston, into the 1st Regiment, United States Cavalry, Regular Army, by who, Lieutenant MacArthur, service length, 5 years, eyes, blue, hair, brown, complexion, dark, height, 5 foot 7 inches, muster out of the Army, 16 April 1862 at Pittsburgh Landing, Tennessee. His service ended 9 or 10 days after the famous Battle of Shiloh, where the fighting took place in southwestern Tennessee. At that time the 1st Cavalry was attached to the 2nd Brigade, Cavalry Reserve, Army of the Potomac. There's no telling where Francis went after his discharge, for he is lost in time. His possible ties to John will be covered in later videos covering Cammett's children. In the 3rd record found for Sarah, in the 1865 Massachusetts census, Sarah is still living with her son, John Cammett. She is now 79 years old, John is 61. We can also see there is a single female boarder living with them. On a cold month of January, the death of Sarah Seavey Cammett was recorded in Amesbury, Essex, Massachusetts on January 28, 1871. The entry specified, Sarah Seavey Cammett, female, widow, aged 84 years, 6 months, and 17 days. The cause of death was listed as old age. Her residence was Amesbury, and her birthplace Chester, New Hampshire. Her parents were John and Sarah Seavey, both born in Chester, New Hampshire. This information, I am sure, was provided by her son John, including her age at death, which was used to calculate her birthday. Sarah was interred in Union Cemetery located in Chester, New Hampshire. She rests alongside her sons, John and Samuel Shackford Cammett, and 37 other family members. Their burial location and photos of their gravestones can be found on a website named Find a Grave, maintained by its members and owned by Ancestry.com. Great effort went into identifying all the Cammett family members accurately, despite limited documentation from the 1800 to 1840 census, to facilitate further research on their ancestral tree. Coming up, their children.